Welcome to Your Next Move with Kimberly Brown. Today, we are going to talk about a very hot topic. So side hustling, growing your career, being a full-time entrepreneur. The big question sometimes is, can you do both? And I wanted to share a little bit more about my story because I did both for a very, very long time. I have lots of notes here just to make sure that I don't miss anything because I generally don't tell this story about how I built my company and how I really felt uncomfortable even talking about being an entrepreneur or the desire to be an entrepreneur when I was building a career. I have been on the fast track for my career. You see, I still said it. I have been on the fast track like I still am because now I run my own company. I'm still not even used to talking about being a full-time entrepreneur because I was so closely tied to building my career in higher education and then in corporate America. I got the side hustle bug years ago when I found out that people were making money blogging. I had no idea that you were even able to create a blog, work with brands, and make money from advertising or partnerships. And when I saw someone do it, I was like, this could actually be something. I wonder if I could have some type of side business, side hustle. Back then, we just called it blogging. I didn't even hear the term side hustle. Could I have a blog where I'd be able to also make money? At the same time, though, I took pride in building my career and year over year, challenging myself in new roles, getting promoted every 2 to 3 years, being in professional associations, my network. And I liked walking into a conference, a professional conference, and people knew my work. I loved having informational interviews of getting to know people in my field. It was all my jam. Being an entrepreneur was more of this dream. And when I first started, being an entrepreneur was more like I wanted to be a blogger that made money. Like, could I cover my rent or my monthly spa dates or anything that I like? Would I be able to cover it with money I was able to make from blogging? And when I think back on the last 10 years of my career, I know I've covered it in past episodes, I did so much from starting my career development job in 2011 to working at 2 Ivy League institutions, then making my corporate transition. But if we talk about my entrepreneurial journey, I can bring it back to 2011 as well. In 2011, I started blogging in the health and wellness space. And I've said this before, I will say it again. I ain't telling you where the URL is because I can't figure it out. And I actually blogged under an alias for a very long time because I just wasn't sure about working full time and running a business. But I blogged about health and wellness. I was on a weight loss journey and obsessed with fitness and trying new things. In 2013, I launched Manifest Yourself. However, it was a little bit different than you see it today. I was still talking a lot about health and wellness, but there was this fine line in between who I was as Kimberly, the professional in the career and leadership development space, and Kimberly, who loved health and wellness. The original tagline for Manifest Yourself was an overachiever learning it's okay to just achieve, because I was always striving for the next thing, and blogging was where I got to be imperfect. I started going to a bunch of different conferences and learning about the business of blogging, the business of partnerships and what that looked like. But over time, it just felt like it was too much to really separate my life the way that I had. It was a career and leadership development professional during the day, and it was blogging at night and kind of experimenting, sharing more about myself online. But by 2017, I filed for my LLC. And that's when I knew that things were going to get kind of serious. In 2019, I turned up the heat and started really merging both of my worlds and leaning further into the career and leadership development side. And in 2021, I resigned into my corporate job full time. No, take that back. I resigned from my corporate job to do my business full time. But I will say that starting in 2018, that is when it actually started to get pretty difficult to do both at the same time. When I think about my vacations, I didn't have vacations anymore. Every single time I took vacation time, that was for speaking engagements or blogging conferences or business coaches that I invested in that would have retreats. And I started to get pushed to do more things during traditional business hours, which for some folks is not possible. But in the job that I had, I always had a lunch break. I always had a little bit of time where I was able to sneak off and answer an email or work on some part of my business, or I'd bring my iPad to the office so I was able to do a little bit more if I had a lighter day. And 2019, when I finally transitioned into corporate America, I started to get really, really nervous. For me, I always wanted to be a full-time entrepreneur, and I want to say wanted in quotes. I think since 2015, I found journal entries talking about, I really wonder if I'll be a full-time entrepreneur. Once I can make this amount of money, that's when I'll do it. But in 2019 is when it became serious, because my business was booked and busy. I was blessed to have so much business pouring in, but at the same time, I just transitioned into a big job in corporate America, managing in a global role, building a team. It was so much. And at the same time, I was making an entry-level professional salary in my company. I also had to pay some taxes for my business for the first time. And that's when I knew I really needed to figure out, is this something I'm going to continue to work on? Or is it really just going to be a passion project? In 2020, as we all know, the pandemic hit, and that gave me a lot of flexibility that was super helpful. It was difficult to still manage, but I signed a book deal, and I knew that, okay, this is really serious. I knew it was serious before, but I knew that now, I'd have to make some decisions. I wouldn't be able to do both. And I think there was a defining moment for myself when I knew that I had to move, and I'll never forget, I was in the elevator at my corporate job. And I was in the elevator with my leader and my skip leader, so 2 VPs of the company, and someone came into the elevator who I didn't know, and they said, "Oh my gosh, are you Kimberly from Manifest Yourself? What are you doing here? Are you teaching a workshop or speaking today?" And I had to say no. I was like, "I work here." They're like, "You have a full-time job? Really?" And I don't want to say that I was embarrassed, but that's when I knew that I really needed to turn it up. I think up until that point, I worked hard. I was excited about building a company, but in my mind, it still wasn't possible. It was still a dream. It was this distant wish that I could take baby steps toward. But that moment in the elevator was like, oh wow, this is more than possible. And I need to start taking what I like to call inspired action. In 2021, things got really, really hard at work. And in a beautiful way, my role had expanded. I had more team than I ever had. I had more projects, more influence, everything. But at the same time, I had just finished writing a book, and I was preparing for a tour. My company was making money. We had new contracts. And it just became to the point where I felt like I had to make a decision. I was burning the candle at both ends. And for years, I told myself that I will not resign from my full-time job until I can no longer do both. And I was finally at that point where I could no longer do both. So I ultimately resigned. And I just want to share with you that entrepreneurship wasn't something that I looked at as I was pushing for, that I needed it. It was more of, this may happen, but I love my job, so I'm not rushing it. But over time, after setting lackluster date after saying, I'm going to resign by this date, or I had business coaches who really wanted me to push and do it, it wasn't until 2021 that I was like, oh, this is really, really going to happen for me. And in the early 2021, I attended a conference, and the coach I was working with had me write down my resignation date, that I was going to resign in May of 2021. And oddly enough, that letter that I was forced to write, I was very nervous and honestly didn't believe it. I ended up resigning within a week of that date. So I share all this about my story, about side hustling and entrepreneurship, really to just say you have options. I was fortunate enough to build my own company while I was working full time, while I enjoyed my job, while I worked in different industries. It's not to say that wasn't hard. If you've listened to some of my episodes with Jessica Hurley, we've talked a lot about my drive, my compulsion, and it was not something that I would say is easy. But as you're thinking about what you want to do, I want to challenge you to think about, what type of career do you want? And what type of company, side hustle, business do you want? Because can you have both? Yes, you absolutely can have both. But what is your life going to look like? What is the vision for your life, the vision for your business, the vision for your company, the vision for your corporate job? And when I say corporate job, I mean wherever you are. I don't care if you're a nonprofit, education, wherever. In your 9-to-5 job, what does that look like for you, and what do you feel is possible? So do you want to run your side hustle long term? Is this really a side hustle that you like to kind of play with on the weekends? Maybe you have a photography business, and when you get a wedding, you get a wedding. If you don't, it's fine. You just do it for the love of doing it. Or is your goal to run that business full time? The hustle that you have looks very different. And for me, that's when I knew I had to turn up the volume. In 2019, 2020, I knew that I had to go hard or go home. Once you start paying taxes on your business, for me, that was like, oh, I need to make a decision. So I'm not going to be paying taxes for something that's just a fun hobby. That's what it was for me. If you want to move into your business full time, how can you set your priorities so that you're working toward what you want your long-term vision to be? And what is your exit strategy? For me, I had to have a certain amount of savings in order for me to feel comfortable jumping. Yes, I talked about all the other things that were happening and it was crazy, but at the same time, I also wanted to have that money on the back end. Some people are comfortable jumping. I wanted to have the money on the back end. So I have some key questions that I encourage you to ask yourself. What are your company policies on running a business? Because the realities are that running a business sometimes cannot be permitted depending upon where you work. And I definitely ran into some of those issues myself, talking about sharing on social media or not having competing priorities or the same clients. Make sure you understand what your company's rules are around you running a business. If it's in a similar line of work as what you do full time, what are your boundaries? So for instance, when I was a career coach, I do career coaching for my business. I would never work with someone who is affiliated with the university I currently worked at full time. You couldn't be a student, you couldn't be an alum. I didn't even want your parents to be an alum. It had to be a clear line of distinction that they would not have access to services through the university if they were working with me. How will you manage both jobs? What does your schedule look like? For a long time, I worked from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. before going into the office every day. Those are the hours that worked for me, and I had a strict lunch break that I made sure I used for my business. How will you prioritize rest? I know for me, I use most of my vacation time for my business, but I found little ways to sneak away for a weekend or add a day onto a business trip, but I knew my priority over time was to go full time. So I knew that I had to push before I was able to rest as much as I can now. And what do you need to be successful with both? I had so many amazing business coaches, and honestly have amazing business coaches because I always have someone in my network who I'm able to reach out to. Who do you need to help you get your business up and running? And who do you also need in your career? We've talked about relationships on podcast episodes before. So I've talked about the 4 key relationships that are essential for you to have. And I also talk about this in my book. What relationships do you need to catapult your career? And what relationships do you need to catapult your business or help you grow and sustain your business? Everyone's journey is a little bit different. And I don't think there's really a right or wrong answer to how you opt to build your business or how you opt to grow your career. But what I will say is if you're looking to do both, you have to determine what your vision is and what is going to ultimately make you happy. So with that, may your next move, whether it is in business or in your career or both, be your best move. Talk soon.
And going, how do I pour more out of me? We all have greatness in us, a level of greatness. So when I say go beyond greatness, to transcend to the other side of greatness. How do we get to whoever the GOAT is? They're the GOAT currently because we haven't seen anyone do better.